Do we as Christians look at the Bible in a value-free way, a view from nowhere, or do we look at it through a cultural lens? Hello and welcome to this video on dealing with complexity at church. We're exploring frameworks and models and how they apply to the conversations we might have. This video looks at Ken Wilber's integral stages of development. Ken Wilber demonstrates in his stages of development some of the lenses we might adopt and should be aware of, as they often frame the conversations we have in groups. This model differentiates between the types of group culture, calling them tribal, traditional, modern, postmodern, and integral. There are others before and after these, but this is the focus for this short video. They are listed in order of the age in which the culture becomes predominant. That is to say, all have existed and do exist in some form through human history, but they have become the mainstream perspective at different points. Postmodernism only coming to the fore in the past 50 or so years of human history with the rise of globalism. That said, however, each culture does exist in parallel, and we will look at what a church group might look like in each and how they interact with each other. So let's start with tribal. The key elements of tribal culture are strong leadership with absolute power, impulsive decision-making, and fragile structures. A church of this culture might look like a house church led by one very enigmatic individual that took a risk and started the church. It's vibrant and topical, but maybe church doesn't happen if the leader isn't there that week. They hold all the power as they host it at their house, they own all the resources, they probably provide the food and maybe even play the music. They're a compelling teacher, but they're an impulsive decision maker, and that sometimes gets them into trouble. They'll burn themselves out as they don't delegate anything, since they want to maintain a tight control over everything, leading to bouts of anxiety and depression. Other people will probably burn out as well, trying to keep up with their energy and trying to buoy them along when they're down. Some weeks it all comes together and it's exciting and magical, but other weeks it's volatile. This is the tribal culture. A traditional culture mitigates against the swinging highs and lows of tribal culture by introducing a clear leadership structure. It will define roles within a hierarchy, and positions will have limited power that different individuals can hold. This brings stability and longevity, but also rigidity and a lack of innovation. A church of this culture would be one that has been established for several generations, has set start times and orders of service. They will uphold the constitution and have very clearly defined roles. Everyone will know their set of responsibilities. Any changes to the way things are done will have to go through a series of subcommittees before being taken to the elders to be agreed on. Relying on the way things have always been done and general risk aversion means very few changes are actually agreed on. This is the traditional culture. A modernist culture mitigates against the rigidity and control of a traditional culture by taking a more meritocratic stance, meaning that anyone can take an idea and run with it if they have the competence and resources. This is epitomized in the American dream. Anybody can become anything. You can get ahead by being an efficient, well-oiled machine that is data-driven and measures everything. This, however, uses copious amounts of physical and mental resources and doesn't really allow for the nuances of human complexity. A church of this culture is one that gets out preaching every weekend in the park. New members are given a welcome pack. You're expected to give 110%. Give your evenings and weekends to helping the church grow. Everyone knows the numbers of new members coming through the door and what it's being measured against. If you have a good idea, you'll be really encouraged to innovate and make it work. But needing to step back and take a break will be seen as a weakness. For all the new members joining the church, there may just as well be as many leaving from having been burnt out and made to feel like they're not doing enough. This is the modernist, also known as the Achievist culture. A postmodern culture mitigates against how a modernist culture will treat people as a resource or just a cog in a machine by introducing an empathetic approach that encourages and works with diversity and complexity. You're more than just a number. You're part of a family, not of a machine. This culture is good at equality and developing softer skills like communication and listening. It is tolerant and inclusive of all walks of life, unless that individual is not themselves tolerant or inclusive. This culture would have lots of away days, retreat weekends, to ensure you really get to know one another. They have a loose collective identity and a loose schedule, directed by how the people present feel in the moment. It will encourage marginal voices to speak up. Services will range from a regular talk to a silent meditation session. Tolerance is key. Anyone who tries to impose their set of views on other people will be vilified and known as intolerant. This, however, means that an implicit leadership develops, made up of those who know the unwritten rules of the most recent thing to become tolerant of. So we've just looked at 4 of the most predominant cultures in society today. And it's interesting to point out that traditional looks down on tribal as infantile, modern looks down on traditional as infantile, and postmodern looks down on modern as infantile. In the same way that religion looks down on paganism as infantile, science looks down on religion as infantile, and the post-truth, post-modern world looks down on science as having all the answers as infantile. In many ways, each culture is a reaction against the previous one. And so this moves us on to integral. Now, an integral culture achieves a broad enough perspective to become aware and be cognizant of each culture, its strengths to be harnessed and its weaknesses to be kept in check, and tries to integrate all of its strengths. Realizing that each culture is a reaction against the previous predominant culture, I feel an integral culture takes on a right hemisphere view of the whole and sees how each culture forms part of a bigger developmental journey that should be integrated. When it comes to having group discussions, it's useful to be aware of the dominant culture in the group, as well as the culture that you and others are trying to make moves towards. There are probably overlaps here with David Cantor's open, closed, random, and synchronous systems from structural dynamics that we looked at in video 5. But it's important to realize each of these cultures, structures, or moral matrices are acting in a way as controlling or nurturing parents over the societies they form, and we can respond to them as complicit or rebellious children. The integral stance, however, is more like that of the adult from transactional analysis, or the master, the bystander that is able to step back and enter a level 3 or 4 listening perspective to obtain an understanding of the greater developing whole. And that is the message of these videos, and I believe a way to wisdom that the Bible shows us. When we step back, not in a passive way, but in a way that is inquiring of one another, so that we can find those ways in which we can love our brothers and sisters, love our neighbours, and the people that we meet. Now, this doesn't just apply to church, it applies to all sorts of situations. The more we can find out about each other, the more inquiring we can be, the more we have the ability to soften our approach to others and show them love because we understand them, we know their needs, we know what their requests might be, and therefore we can give those requests lovingly and willingly in a Christ-like way. Thank you for listening to this series. I really appreciate any comments and feedback that you might have. The next video in this series will summarise everything that we've looked at so far to tie it together and conclude the series.